I'm Mackenzie Thompson, 27, and every morning I sip coffee on my porch watching the house across the street, my childhood home that I was forced to leave over a bedroom. 3 years ago, my parents gave me an ultimatum: give up my room or get out. I chose freedom, never imagining I'd one day purchase the property directly opposite theirs. The house where I now build my empire stands as a daily reminder that sometimes the worst rejection leads to the greatest success. Before I dive into how this all unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you love stories about turning obstacles into stepping stones, and join me on this journey of unexpected triumph. I grew up in a quaint middle-class neighborhood in Boston in a white colonial with blue shutters that my parents Richard and Catherine purchased when I was 3. Dad worked as a financial analyst at a prestigious firm downtown, bringing home a comfortable salary with annual bonuses that funded family vacations to Florida or the occasional weekend in New York. Mom taught third grade at the elementary school 6 blocks away, a job she loved for its schedule that allowed her to be home when we returned from school. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. Dad mowed the lawn every Saturday morning while Mom planted vibrant flowers in the garden beds. I had a younger brother, Tyler, who was the golden child from the moment he arrived when I was 11. Our neighborhood friends called our parents the Dream Team because they attended every school function, hosted the best 4th of July barbecues, and always had cookies baking in the oven for impromptu playdates. But inside those 4 walls, the family dynamic told a different story. While my parents provided everything we needed materially, the emotional landscape of our home was uneven terrain. Tyler, with his athletic build and outgoing personality, naturally gravitated towards sports. By 16, he was the star quarterback for our high school team, bringing home trophies that Dad proudly displayed in the living room showcase. Every Friday night, my parents would sit front row at his games, Dad filming each touchdown while Mom cheered until she was hoarse. I, on the other hand, was the introvert. Gangly with perpetually ink-stained fingers and glasses that slipped down my nose, I found my passion in the digital world. At 13, I could disassemble and rebuild a computer from spare parts. By 15, I had taught myself 3 programming languages and built a rudimentary app that tracked local bus schedules more accurately than the city's official website. My bedroom became my sanctuary, my own little tech hub. The walls were covered with posters of women in STEM: Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper, and modern tech pioneers. My desk was cluttered with computer components, wires, and coding books. Dad called it the command center with a tone that never quite masked his bemusement. Mom would smile indulgently when I tried to explain my latest project, her eyes glazing over after the first mention of algorithms or data structures. The only person who truly encouraged my technological interests was my grandmother, Elaine, Mom's mother. Grandma Elaine had been a secretary at IBM in the early days and understood the power of computing before most people could spell digital. When I turned 12, she gifted me my first real computer, not a gaming system or a simple homework machine, but a customizable rig with enough processing power to run serious programs. Women have always been at the forefront of computing, Mackenzie, she told me as I unwrapped the massive box. They just don't always get the credit. You remember that when you're changing the world one day. Dad looked at the expensive equipment with skepticism. That's a lot of computer for a little girl. Hopefully she won't lose interest by next month. That computer became my gateway to a world where gender and age didn't matter, only skill and creativity. I spent countless hours learning, building, creating. While Tyler's achievements were celebrated with parties and public praise, mine were met with passive acknowledgement. "That's nice, dear," Mom would say when I showed her a website I had built from scratch. "Don't forget to eat dinner." My high school years further cemented the differing treatment. When Tyler was recruited by college scouts in his junior year, Dad took 2 weeks off work to drive him to various campuses. My acceptance into advanced STEM programs earned a congratulatory nod and a reminder not to stay up too late working on computer stuff. The bright spot in my high school experience was Miss Amelia Wilson, my computer science teacher. In her classroom, I wasn't the odd girl out, but a promising talent. She recognized my abilities early on and pushed me harder than other students, giving me college-level assignments when I finished the regular curriculum by October. "You have a mind for this, Mackenzie," she told me after I debugged a program that had stumped even her. "Promise me you won't let anyone tell you otherwise." Under her guidance, I participated in national coding competitions, often placing in the top percentiles. These achievements barely registered at home, while Tyler's trophies, even for participation, were cause for celebration dinners. By senior year, the inequality was so normal I hardly noticed it anymore. I applied to colleges, quietly working with Miss Wilson on essays and applications during lunch breaks. When the thick envelope from Massachusetts Institute of Technology arrived with a partial scholarship offer, I opened it alone in my room, silently celebrating what would be my ticket to a world where my talents would finally be recognized. That evening at dinner, I mustered the courage to announce my acceptance. Mom paused, serving lasagna, her expression a mix of surprise and pride. Dad looked up from his phone where he'd been showing Tyler's latest game highlights to a colleague. MIT, that's in Massachusetts, right? He asked, as if I'd chosen some obscure institution. It's in Cambridge, Dad. It's one of the top engineering schools in the world, I explained, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Well, that's something, he said, returning to his phone. Tuition must be steep. We'll have to see what we can manage after Tyler's sports camps this summer. And just like that, my greatest achievement was acknowledged and dismissed in the span of 30 seconds before the conversation returned to Tyler's prospects for senior year football. Later that night, Grandma Elaine called, having heard the news from Mom. "I'm booking a flight for your graduation," she said firmly. "And I'm setting aside a fund for your books at MIT. Don't argue with me, it's already done." That night, as I looked at MIT's welcome package spread across my bed, I allowed myself to imagine a future where being Mackenzie Thompson meant something powerful and respectable. A future where my worth wasn't measured against my brother's athletic trophies or my father's narrow definition of success. Little did I know that the road to that future would be paved with unexpected challenges and betrayals from the very people who were supposed to support me most. My parents' reaction to my MIT acceptance foreshadowed the next chapter of our relationship. While the partial scholarship covered about 60% of my tuition, the remaining costs plus housing, books, and living expenses were significant. I had assumed, perhaps naively, that they would help as much as they could, just as they were planning for Tyler's college fund despite his mediocre grades. "We'll contribute $3,000 per semester," Dad announced one evening, pushing a spreadsheet across the kitchen table. "The rest you'll need to figure out with loans or work study." I stared at the numbers. Their contribution would barely cover my housing costs for half a semester. Meanwhile, Tyler's potential football scholarship was supplemented with a success fund my parents had been building since his first touchdown in middle school. "I understand," I said, swallowing my disappointment. What else could I do? My first semester at MIT was a baptism by fire. Between the rigorous coursework and working 20 hours a week at the campus, IT help desk, and another 10 as a teaching assistant for an introductory programming course, I barely had time to sleep. When Tyler called to complain about his high school homework load, I bit my tongue rather than point out the inequality. By sophomore year, I had established a rhythm. My grades were excellent despite my work schedule, and I had started developing an app that helped students navigate campus resources more efficiently. The prototype caught the attention of several professors who encouraged me to expand its functionality. Winter break of sophomore year, I returned home with excitement about my app's potential. Mom had decorated the house with her usual Christmas extravagance, but something felt off when I walked into my bedroom. Half of my posters had been removed and boxes of Tyler's sports equipment cluttered one corner. My desk had been pushed against the wall to make room for a treadmill. "We needed some storage space," Mom explained when I asked. "Your room was the obvious choice since you're away most of the time." I nodded, unpacking my suitcase into the remaining drawer space. The message was clear. My place in this house was diminishing, becoming conditional rather than permanent. That spring semester, I threw myself into my app development with renewed intensity. The displacement in my childhood home had cut deeper than I cared to admit, and work became my refuge. That's when I met Ryan Martinez in an advanced programming lab. Tall, with perpetually tousled dark hair and glasses that actually suited his face unlike mine, Ryan was brilliant at coding and completely lacking in social skills, a perfect match for my own awkward brilliance. We started as study partners, then became friends, and by junior year we were both business partners and a couple. Our campus resource app evolved into a comprehensive platform for students to access everything from class schedules to mental health resources, cafeteria menus, and local transit information. Together we secured $10,000 in seed funding from a university innovation grant. Junior year winter break, I returned home with real news to share. Our app had over 5,000 active users, and we were in talks with investors about expanding to other campuses. I had printed screenshots and user testimonials, proud to show my parents that my computer stuff was becoming something substantial. When I opened the door to my bedroom, I froze. My bookshelf had been removed entirely. My desk was now covered with Mom's sewing supplies. My bed remained, but the room was clearly no longer considered mine. Your father and I thought it made sense to use the space, Mom explained when I confronted her not meeting my eyes. Tyler needs a place to work out during the winter when he can't train outside. So you're converting my room into a home gym? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Without asking me. Mackenzie, don't be dramatic, Dad interjected. You're barely here 5 weeks out of the year. It seems wasteful to keep a room as a shrine to someone who's moved on. Moved on, I repeated. I'm still in college. This is still my home. The conversation ended there with nothing resolved. I spent the break sleeping in my partially converted bedroom, feeling like a guest in what was once my sanctuary. I didn't argue further. What was the point? I returned to MIT earlier than planned, telling Mom I had project deadlines. Back at school, Ryan noticed my subdued mood. What's wrong? Bad break. I told him everything, finally letting the hurt pour out. He listened without interrupting, then pulled me into a hug. Their loss, he said simply. Let's build something so amazing they'll have to pay attention, and that's exactly what we did. Our app gained traction beyond MIT, expanding to 3 other Boston area colleges by the end of junior year. We incorporated as a small business, working nights and weekends between classes. By graduation, we had 20,000 active users and serious interest from several angel investors. When my parents and Tyler attended my MIT graduation, I could see the surprise on their faces, as several professors stopped to congratulate me, specifically on my entrepreneurial vision. Dad raised his eyebrows when the department chair mentioned our company by name in her speech, highlighting student innovations. You've been busy, he commented afterward in a tone that suggested he was just realizing I hadn't spent 4 years simply studying. Yes, I replied simply. I have. Ryan and I decided to stay in Boston post-graduation to grow our company. We found a tiny office space above a coffee shop in Cambridge and poured every waking hour into improving our product. With graduation behind us, we could finally focus entirely on building our business. I kept minimal contact with my family during this time, occasional texts with Mom, perfunctory birthday calls. The distance wasn't entirely intentional, but their repeated message that I wasn't a priority had finally sunk in. I was building my own life now, one where my value wasn't constantly questioned. After graduation, Ryan and I faced a critical decision. Our company was gaining traction, but we were bootstrapping everything, living on ramen and coffee to funnel every possible dollar back into development. We needed to stretch our runway until our next funding round. I could move back home temporarily, I suggested during one of our budget meetings in our cramped office, just for a few months to save on rent. My parents' house is only 40 minutes from here by train. Ryan looked concerned. Are you sure that's a good idea after everything you've told me about how they treat you? I shrugged. It won't be ideal, but it'll save us almost $2,000 a month. That's another developer we could hire part-time. The business logic was sound, so I called my mother that evening. Would it be okay if I moved back home temporarily just for a few months while we secure our next round of funding? Of course, honey, Mom replied, sounding genuinely pleased. Your room is. Well, we can make it work. I should have recognized the hesitation in her voice as a warning sign. When I arrived home with my 2 suitcases and laptop bag, Tyler greeted me with a casual "Hey sis" before returning to his video game. Mom gave me a quick tour of the house, as if I were a visitor, pointing out new furniture and renovations they'd completed since my last visit. And here's where you'll be staying, she said, opening the door to what was once my bedroom. I stood frozen in the doorway. The transformation was complete. My bed remained in one corner, but the rest of the space had been converted into a home gym. A weight bench occupied the center of the room. A squat rack stood where my desk had once been. Free weights lined the walls, and a large mirror had been installed to check form while lifting. Where are my things? I asked quietly. In boxes in the attic, Mom replied, not meeting my eyes. We can bring down whatever you need. That night I slept surrounded by the trappings of my brother's athletic pursuits, the smell of rubber mats and metal weights, replacing the familiar scent of books and electronics that had once defined my personal space. The next morning I carefully raised the subject with both parents over breakfast. I understand you've been using my room differently, I began diplomatically. But since I'll be living here for a few months, could we maybe move some of the gym equipment to the basement or garage? I need space to work on my laptop and spread out my development materials. Dad lowered his newspaper, his expression immediately defensive. Tyler uses that equipment every day. His football conditioning is critical right now with college scouts coming to games. I understand, but besides, he continued as if I hadn't spoken, we were surprised you wanted to move back at all. Aren't you supposed to be some big-shot app developer now? His tone made the question sound like a challenge. We're in a growth phase, I explained, trying to keep my voice even. Most startups require significant investment before they turn profitable. We're being strategic with our resources. Mom placed a hand on Dad's arm. Richard, maybe we could move some things around. Mackenzie needs a place to work. For a moment, I thought she was actually taking my side. Then Tyler walked in fresh from his morning run. No way, he said, grabbing a protein shake from the fridge. Coach said I need to add 15 pounds of muscle before senior year. I can't miss a day of training. See, Dad, gestured toward Tyler. He needs the equipment right there convenient, so he can maintain his schedule. I need a place to work, I insisted. I'm trying to build a company. Your little app thing can wait, Dad dismissed. Tyler's got actual physical development happening now. Crucial timing. The conversation escalated from there. My careful explanations about our company's potential were met with skepticism. Dad repeatedly referred to our business as playing with computers while describing Tyler's football prospects as real opportunities. Finally, after 20 minutes of circular argument, Dad pushed back from the table. Look, it's simple. That room is set up as a gym now. If that doesn't work for you, you're welcome to find other arrangements. I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. Are you seriously telling me to move out because I want to use my own bedroom as something other than my brother's personal fitness center? I'm saying we have priorities in this house, and right now Tyler's development is one of them, Dad replied coldly. You're an adult with a fancy MIT degree. Figure it out. Richard, Mom interjected weakly. Surely we can compromise. There's nothing to compromise on, Catherine. The equipment stays. Mackenzie can adapt or make other arrangements. I looked to my mother for support, but she averted her eyes, her momentary advocacy collapsing under my father's determination. Tyler stood silently by the fridge, looking uncomfortable but making no move to offer alternatives. So that's the ultimatum, I asked quietly. Give up any claim to space in this house or leave. Don't be dramatic, Mackenzie, Dad sighed. If you were as successful as you think you are, you wouldn't need our help anyway. That night, I lay on my bed in the corner of what was now definitively Tyler's gym, listening to my parents' voices drift up from the living room below. She's always been stubborn, Dad was saying, thinking she deserves special treatment. She's working very hard on her business, Richard, Mom replied. So she says. But moving back home doesn't sound like success to me. She's just being practical. No, she's being ungrateful. We put her through MIT, and now she comes back demanding we rearrange the house for her computer games. I pressed my pillow against my ears, but their words had already burned into my consciousness. The next morning I called Ryan. I can't stay here, I told him, voice steady, despite having barely slept. Do you mind if I crash on your couch until we figure something else out? Already inflating the air mattress, he replied without hesitation. Need help moving. Ryan arrived 2 hours later in his beat-up Honda Civic. We loaded my 2 suitcases, laptop bag, and the few boxes of personal items Mom had reluctantly retrieved from the attic. The entire process took less than an hour. Mom hovered anxiously in the doorway as we worked. You don't have to leave, Mackenzie, she said, but offered no actual solution to the situation. Dad was conspicuously absent, having left for work earlier than usual. Tyler appeared briefly, mumbled something about sorry it didn't work out, then disappeared back to his room, his actual room which had remained untouched and sacred all these years. As Ryan and I prepared to leave, Mom pressed a Tupperware container of homemade cookies into my hands. Call when you're settled, she said, as if I were going on vacation rather than being forced out of my childhood home. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the house recede in the side mirror. The blue shutters, the manicured lawn, the perfect exterior hiding the conditional love within those walls. You okay? Ryan asked as we turned the corner. I took a deep breath. I will be. What I didn't tell him, what I barely admitted to myself, was the determination crystallizing in my chest. I would never put myself in a position to be discarded like that again. Never. Ryan's apartment was a 1-bedroom in Somerville, with barely enough space for him, let alone an additional person. The couch I slept on was second-hand and lumpy, with a spring that poked my back no matter how I positioned myself. But it was mine, freely offered without conditions or judgments. Stay as long as you need, Ryan insisted when I tried to establish a timeline for finding my own place. We're saving money, remember, business decision. He winked, transforming my humiliation into pragmatism with that simple gesture. Our workdays stretched into nights as we poured everything into our company. I was determined to prove my father wrong, not just about my business but about my worth. I took on additional consulting work on the side, building websites for local businesses to generate extra cash flow. On many nights I coded until 3 a.m., fell asleep for a few hours on the couch, then woke at 7 a.m. to start again. 2 weeks after moving onto Ryan's couch, Mom texted asking if I was coming home for Sunday dinner. I stared at the message for a long time before responding with a brief "can't this week" deadline approaching. I couldn't bring myself to call it home anymore. The texts continued casual inquiries about my well-being, updates about neighborhood happenings, the occasional mention that your father asks about you. I responded with increasing brevity until our exchanges became perfunctory at best. Meanwhile, our app was gaining serious traction. A feature in a tech blog brought a wave of new users. A university in California reached out about implementing our platform. We hired our first employee, a brilliant UI designer named James, who worked for equity plus a modest salary. 3 months into living on Ryan's couch, we secured office space, a tiny room above a coffee shop in Cambridge, with just enough space for 3 desks and a whiteboard. The rent strained our budget, but having a dedicated workspace felt like a crucial step toward legitimacy. "We should celebrate," Ryan declared the day we signed the lease. He produced a bottle of cheap champagne and plastic cups from his backpack. To Navigo tech rising from the ashes of parental doubt, I laughed and clinked my cup against his, but the joke hit closer to home than he realized. Each milestone we achieved was another brick in the wall between my past and future. Each new user, each line of code, each investor meeting was proof that I didn't need the approval I'd spent a lifetime seeking. My birthday passed with a card from Mom signed from both parents and a text from Tyler. I spent the evening reviewing code with Ryan and our new developer, barely acknowledging the date. "You should call them Ryan," suggested gently, as we locked up the office that night. "Tomorrow," I said. Tomorrow became next week, then next month. 6 months after the ultimatum, our breakthrough came. A major tech publication featured Navigo as the campus app changing student life. User numbers quadrupled overnight. 3 more universities reached out about licensing our platform. Then came the email that would change everything. A vice president from Connectify, one of the largest tech companies in the country, wanted to schedule a call to discuss potential synergies. We thought they might want to offer partnership opportunities or perhaps integration with their existing products. The reality exceeded our wildest expectations. "We've been watching Navigo's growth with interest," the VP explained during our video call, her corporate backdrop a stark contrast to our cramped office above the coffee shop. "We believe your technology could be integrated across our education vertical. We'd like to discuss acquisition." Ryan and I maintained our poker faces until the call ended, then erupted into shocked laughter and disbelief. "Did that just happen?" I gasped, spinning in my chair. "Acquisition offer from Connectify," Ryan confirmed, eyes wide. "That definitely just happened." The next weeks were a blur of due diligence, negotiation calls, and legal consultations. The initial offer was $8 million. Our lawyer countered at 15. We settled at $12 million, a number so far beyond my comprehension that it didn't seem real even as we signed the final paperwork. The acquisition included employment contracts for both of us. Ryan immediately accepted a position at Connectify's California headquarters. I hesitated. "You're not coming to California?" Ryan asked when I expressed uncertainty. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to start something new now that I have the resources." The truth was more complicated. Success had changed something fundamental in me. The validation of our work, the concrete, undeniable proof that my computer games had real-world value, had awakened an ambition I hadn't recognized before. I didn't want to be absorbed into someone else's company, even one as prestigious as Connectify. I wanted to build something that was unquestionably mine. Our relationship had evolved as well. The romantic aspect had gradually taken a back seat to our business partnership. When Ryan accepted the California position, it felt like a natural transition point for both aspects of our connection. "We'll always be friends," he said on his last night in Boston, both of us knowing that distance and new paths would inevitably change that too. I found a small but elegant apartment in Cambridge and began researching investment opportunities. The freedom of financial security was disorienting after years of counting every dollar. I could buy new clothes without checking price tags. I could eat at restaurants without calculating the impact on my weekly budget. I could breathe. One afternoon, I was browsing real estate listings, idly considering buying a place instead of renting, when a familiar street name caught my eye. A property had just been listed in my old neighborhood directly across from my parents' house. The colonial with the wraparound porch needed work according to the listing. The kitchen was outdated, the bathrooms required modernization, and the landscaping had been neglected. But the bones were good and the location. Well, the location was either perfect or terrible depending on how I looked at it. I scheduled a viewing that same day, telling myself it was mere curiosity. Standing on the porch looking directly at my childhood home across the quiet street, I felt a strange sense of completion. From this vantage point, I could see Dad's meticulously maintained lawn, Mom's flourishing garden, the driveway where Tyler's sporty car was parked next to Dad's sedan. The owners are motivated to sell, the realtor explained, misinterpreting my intense focus on the view. They've already purchased their new home in Florida. I wandered through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The master bedroom had a bay window overlooking the street, a perfect spot for a morning coffee, with a direct line of sight to the house that had once been mine and then decisively not. "I'll take it," I heard myself say before conscious decision had fully formed. The realtor blinked in surprise. "Don't you want to think about it? Perhaps bring a contractor to assess the renovation needs?" "I'm sure," I replied, a calm certainty settling over me. "I'll pay asking price if we can close quickly." As I signed the initial paperwork, I realized I hadn't spoken to my parents in over 2 months. Mom's texts had dwindled to occasional holiday wishes. I hadn't told them about the acquisition or my newfound financial status. They had no idea their daughter was about to become their neighbor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than a year after being told there wasn't room for me in their house, I was purchasing an entire house of my own, one from which I could see their every coming and going. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself as the sale proceeded with remarkable speed. It was about reclaiming power in a relationship that had always been unbalanced. It was about being seen, and perhaps in some small corner of my heart I wasn't ready to examine. It was about still wanting to be close to the family that had pushed me away despite everything. The closing process moved swiftly. With cash in hand from the acquisition, I encountered none of the financing hurdles that typically slow real estate transactions. 6 weeks after my impulsive decision, I held the keys to my new home, a 4-bedroom colonial directly across from my parents'. I hired contractors immediately. The house needed significant updates, but I saw it as a canvas for creating exactly what I wanted. I worked with an interior designer to select everything from kitchen cabinets to bathroom fixtures, carpet textures to wall colors. Each decision felt like an affirmation of my independence and success. "Are you sure about this open concept for the main floor?" the designer asked during one consultation. "It's very modern. The traditional exterior of the home might suggest a more classical interior approach." "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I want light and openness. I want to be able to breathe in every room." I didn't add that I'd spent my life in a traditional home where closed doors and separate spaces facilitated the emotional distance between family members. My new home would be different in every possible way. For the first month of renovations, I maintained my apartment in Cambridge, visiting the construction site daily to check progress. I deliberately scheduled these visits during working hours when my parents would likely be away from their house. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. I wanted the dramatic reveal of moving trucks and completed renovations. My calculated plans collapsed one Wednesday afternoon when Dad arrived home unexpectedly early. I was standing in my front yard discussing landscaping options with the contractor when I spotted his car turning into their driveway. He noticed the construction activity across the street, activity that had been ongoing for weeks but apparently hadn't registered as significant until now. I watched him park, exit his car, and stand for a long moment staring at the dumpster in my driveway, the trucks lining the street, the workers coming and going through the front door. Then his gaze landed on me. Even from this distance, I could read the sequence of emotions crossing his face: curiosity, confusion, recognition, disbelief. He crossed the street with purposeful strides, his business shoes inappropriate for navigating the muddy lawn where sod had been removed. "Mackenzie," he called as he approached. "What's going on here? Are you working for the construction company?" Of course, that would be his assumption that I was an employee rather than the owner. "No, Dad," I replied calmly. "I'm the homeowner. I bought this place 6 weeks ago." He stopped short, blinking rapidly as he processed this information. "You bought a house." "This house?" "Yes. But..." How he looked around at the extensive renovations underway, mental calculations clearly happening behind his furrowed brow. "My company was acquired," I explained simply. "Navigo Tech, the app I was building while sleeping on Ryan's couch after you told me to leave if I wanted space to work." His expression shifted again, disbelief, giving way to something more calculating. "Well, that's wonderful, Mackenzie. Why didn't you tell us? Your mother will be thrilled." The sudden pivot to enthusiastic support was jarring but not unexpected. Success had always been the currency of value in our household. "I've been busy," I replied neutrally. "The acquisition, the move, the renovations." "We should celebrate," he continued, clapping his hands together. "Come over for dinner tonight. Your mother makes that pasta you always loved." "I can't tonight," I said. "I have a meeting with the electrician about rewiring the home office." "Home office," he repeated, glancing back at the house. "So you're working from home now? What happened to your startup thing?" "The startup thing was acquired for $12 million. I stated, allowing myself the small satisfaction of watching his eyes widen. "I'm starting a new venture now. Consulting." Dad's entire demeanor transformed. The father who had dismissed my work as computer games now looked at me with newfound respect, or at least interest in what my success might mean for him. 12 mil. Well, that's incredible. Mackenzie, I always knew you had potential. Remember how I bought you that first computer? That was Grandma Elaine, I corrected quietly. Right. But we always supported your education. MIT. Not everyone gets into MIT, you know. I simply nodded, unwilling to rewrite history to soothe his ego. "Well, dinner soon then," he said, backing away toward his house. "This weekend, maybe. I'll tell your mother you're back in the neighborhood. She'll be over the moon." As predicted, Mom appeared at my front door the very next morning, clutching a potted plant, a peace lily, the symbolism not lost on me. "Mackenzie," she breathed when I opened the door, her eyes taking in my appearance as if confirming I was really there. "Your father told me. The house. Your company." I invited her in, watching as she took in the half-finished renovations, the exposed beams where walls had been removed, the high-end appliances waiting to be installed in the kitchen. "It's going to be beautiful," she said softly, setting the plant on a counter. "I had no idea you were doing so well." "You never asked," I replied, the words coming out more sharply than intended. She flinched, but didn't argue the point. "We've missed you, you know. I've wanted to call so many times, but your father thought we should give you space." "Space," I repeated, the irony of the word not lost on either of us. "I know things didn't end well when you moved out," she continued, eyes fixed on the plant she'd brought rather than meeting my gaze. "I should have said something, done something." It was as close to an apology as I'd likely get, and I accepted it with a nod. "Would you like some coffee? The kitchen's not fully functional yet, but I have a coffee maker set up in what will be the dining room." That first visit established a tentative new dynamic between us. Mom began stopping by every few days, ostensibly to check on the renovation progress, but clearly seeking to rebuild our relationship. She never directly addressed the ultimatum that had driven me away, but her consistent presence in small gestures, bringing homemade muffins, offering to help unpack boxes when I finally moved in, spoke to a desire for reconciliation. Dad was more strategic in his approach. His initial surprise visit was followed by a careful assessment of the situation before he made his next move. When he finally returned, it was with a bottle of expensive champagne to celebrate your success. "I always knew you had it in you," he said, looking around the nearly completed main floor with appraising eyes. "Thompson determination. Gets things done." I accepted the champagne with polite thanks, but didn't open it during his visit. I wasn't ready to toast with him as if the past had been erased by my financial success. Tyler's reaction was the most transparent. He showed up one Saturday morning, curiosity plainly written across his features. "So you're like rich now?" he asked, within minutes of arriving, no preamble necessary between siblings. "I'm comfortable," I replied, amused despite myself by his directness. "Dad says you sold your app for millions." "Something like that." He wandered through the house, whistling appreciatively at the high-end finishes and technology integrated throughout the space. "This is way nicer than our place," he observed. "It will be when it's finished," I agreed. Tyler, now 22, and in his final year of college, seemed different from the entitled teenager I remembered. There was a self-awareness in his questions, an acknowledgement of the inequity that had defined our childhood. "I was a jerk about the room thing," he said, abruptly, as we stood in the kitchen. "I should have said something when Dad was being unreasonable." The simple admission caught me off guard. "You were 19. I offered, surprising myself by providing him an excuse. He shook his head. "Old enough to know better. It was always easier to go along with what Dad wanted. You know." I did know. The path of least resistance in our family had always been aligning with Dad's preferences and priorities. I had simply reached a point where that alignment cost more than I was willing to pay. As I settled into my new home, the neighborhood gossip machine kicked into high gear. Former neighbors who had barely acknowledged my existence as a teenager now made a point of stopping by with welcome baskets and invitations to community events. "Your parents must be thrilled to have you back in the neighborhood," Mrs. Peterson from 2 doors down gushed during one such visit. "It's an adjustment for all of us," I replied diplomatically. The truth was more complicated. Having me directly across the street forced my parents to confront the reality of the daughter they had dismissed. Each visible success, the renovations, the sleek car in my driveway, the delivery of high-end furniture, was a tangible reminder of what they had failed to nurture or even recognize. For Dad, this manifested as attempts to retroactively claim credit for my accomplishments. "I always told you that education would pay off," he would say, when neighbors commented on my success, conveniently forgetting his dismissal of my computer games. Mom oscillated between genuine attempts to rebuild our relationship and anxious efforts to maintain family harmony by smoothing over the tensions between Dad and me. "He's proud of you," she would insist after particularly strained interactions. "He just shows it differently." Tyler surprisingly became something of a bridge between us. Free from the direct competition that had defined our childhood, he seemed eager to establish a more equal sibling relationship. He would text me memes about coding or share articles related to tech entrepreneurship, small gestures that acknowledged my world. 3 months after moving in, my parents extended a Thanksgiving dinner invitation. I accepted with trepidation, knowing the holiday would test our fragile new dynamic. The dinner itself was a masterclass in surface politeness concealing undercurrents of tension. Mom had prepared all my favorite dishes alongside the traditional turkey and stuffing. Dad opened an expensive bottle of wine and made a show of toasting family togetherness. Tyler watched the performance with barely concealed skepticism. "Mackenzie has been nominated for Boston's 30 Under 30 in technology," Mom announced as she served the pumpkin pie, clearly having researched my recent accomplishments. "Wonderful," Dad exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "I always said she'd do something impressive with those computers." I maintained my composure until dessert was finished, then declined their invitation to watch the traditional post-dinner football game. "I have some work to finish up," I explained, rising from the table. "Work on Thanksgiving?" Dad frowned. "Surely whatever it is can wait." "Success requires sacrifice," I replied, echoing one of his favorite phrases from my childhood. "Isn't that what you always said?" Walking back across the street to my own home, I felt both the weight of unresolved history and the freedom of having created my own space physically and emotionally. The house lights glowed welcomingly as I approached, no conditions attached to my belonging there. The reality was becoming increasingly clear. Physical proximity hadn't healed the fundamental issues in our relationship. Being neighbors had merely created a new context for old patterns to emerge. True healing would require more than polite dinners and retroactive approval. It would require honest confrontation of the past, something none of us seemed quite ready to initiate. With the major renovations complete, my house transformed from a construction site into a home that reflected both my aesthetic and values. The once traditional colonial now featured an open-concept main floor filled with natural light. The kitchen gleamed with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, not because I was an accomplished cook, but because I wanted every aspect of my home to represent quality and intention. The second floor contained my bedroom suite, 2 guest rooms, and most importantly, a state-of-the-art home office. This space, with its wall-mounted monitors, ergonomic furniture, and fiber-optic internet connection, became the headquarters for my new venture, Thompson Tech Consulting. I had discovered during the acquisition process that I possessed valuable insight into scaling early-stage tech companies. While my peers often focused exclusively on development or business growth, my approach integrated both. This holistic methodology became the foundation for my consulting practice. Within 6 months of launching, I had signed contracts with 5 promising startups. I hired Eliza, a recent MIT graduate with dual degrees in computer science and business, as my first employee. We converted one of the guest bedrooms into a second office space for her. "This is incredible," Eliza commented during her first day looking around at the house. "Most startups begin in basements or cramped apartments." "I did my time on a secondhand couch," I replied with a smile. "We're skipping that phase this round." The business grew rapidly through referrals. By the end of our first year, we had expanded to a team of 5, all women with technology backgrounds. The symbolism wasn't lost on clients or industry observers. When the Boston Business Journal requested an interview about Thompson Tech's all-female team, I used the opportunity to announce our scholarship program for young women in STEM. The Thompson Tech initiative will provide 5 full scholarships annually to female high school students pursuing computer science degrees, I explained to the journalist. We're not just building a company, we're helping build the next generation of technology leaders. The article featured a photo of me on my front porch, my parents' house visible but out of focus in the background. I wondered if they would notice the symbolism when they inevitably read the piece. Mom called the day the article was published. "We're so proud," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father's already shown the magazine to everyone at his office." I thanked her politely but changed the subject before discussing Dad's reaction further. Our relationship had settled into a careful civility, regular but brief interactions characterized by surface-level pleasantries, rather than meaningful connection. The scholarship announcement brought an unexpected but welcome reunion. Miss Wilson, my high school computer science teacher, emailed congratulations along with an update on her current students who might benefit from the program. "I'd love to catch up in person if you're available," she wrote. "It's been too long since we've talked coding." We met for coffee the following week, and the conversation flowed as if the years between hadn't existed. Now in her mid-50s, Miss Wilson had the same passionate energy about technology education that had inspired me as a teenager. "I'm considering retirement in a few years," she mentioned, as we discussed changes in the field. "The politics of public education are wearing me down." "Have you thought about what comes next?" I asked. She shrugged. "Consulting, maybe. Working with districts on curriculum development. Or," I suggested the idea forming as I spoke, "you could help shape the next generation of women in tech more directly. Thompson Tech could use an education director for our scholarship program and outreach initiatives." Her eyes widened. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm floating the possibility," I clarified. "For when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline." 3 months later, Miss Wilson Amelia, as she now insisted I call her, joined Thompson Tech as our Director of Educational Initiatives. Having my former mentor now as a colleague and friend brought my journey full circle in the most satisfying way. Around this time, I received worrying news about Grandma Elaine. Mom called one evening, her voice tight with concern. "Your grandmother had a fall," she explained. "Nothing broken, thankfully, but the doctor doesn't think she should be living alone anymore." "What are the options?" I asked, immediately alert. "We're looking into assisted living facilities," Mom replied. "But they're expensive and her insurance coverage is limited." "What about her moving in with you and Dad?" I suggested, already anticipating the answer. "Your father thinks it would be too disruptive," Mom said carefully. "With his recent promotion, he's entertaining clients at home more often and..." She trailed off, but I understood the unspoken explanation. Grandma Elaine had always been too outspoken, too independent for Dad's taste. Her presence would disrupt the controlled environment he preferred. "She can move in with me," I said, without hesitation. "I have plenty of space and I could use the company." The third guest bedroom, which I had been considering converting to a small gym, became Grandma Elaine's room instead. I hired contractors to add accessibility features to the bathroom and install a chairlift on the stairs. By the time she moved in 2 weeks later, the space was perfectly adapted to her needs while maintaining its dignity and style. "You didn't have to do all this," she protested when I showed her the room, her eyes misty. "I would have been fine with just a bed and a chair." "You gave me my first computer," I reminded her. "Consider this partial repayment for launching my career." Having Grandma in my home brought an unexpected joy and balance to my life. Her sharp mind and wry observations provided perspective when I became too absorbed in work. Her presence reminded me to pause, to recognize the value of connection beyond professional achievement. She also served as a bridge between me and my parents, particularly Mom. Where direct interactions between us remained stilted, visits to see Grandma Elaine created natural opportunities for more relaxed engagement. Mom would bring homemade soup or fresh flowers, staying to chat while Grandma napped. "Your mother tries," Grandma told me one evening as we shared tea in the kitchen. "She's caught between her husband and her daughter, and she never learned how to stand firm in either direction." "I know," I acknowledged. "I don't blame her anymore. I just wish things could be different." "They can be," Grandma said simply. "But someone has to be brave enough to speak the truth first." My business continued to flourish throughout this period. Thompson Tech expanded to a team of 15, outgrowing the home office arrangement. We leased a beautiful space in a historic building downtown but maintained the original home office for days when I preferred to work near Grandma Elaine. The Boston Business Journal featured us again, this time in a cover story about innovative consulting practices. The accompanying photo showed our diverse team gathered around a conference table with me at the head gesturing toward a digital display. 2 days after the article appeared, I returned from a client meeting to find a handwritten note from my father in the mailbox. The formal stationery from his firm lent an air of officialness to the message. Dinner at our house Saturday at 7. The neighbors will be joining us. Business casual attire suggested. RSVP appreciated. Not an invitation so much as a summons. No mention of the article or congratulations on the feature. Just an expectation of my presence at what was clearly planned as a social opportunity for him to showcase his successful daughter. I showed the note to Grandma Elaine, who snorted dismissively. Typical Richard. He wants to parade you around now that you're successful enough to impress his friends. Should I go? I asked, genuinely uncertain. She patted my hand. That's for you to decide, dear. Just be clear about why you're accepting if you do. After careful consideration, I sent a polite acceptance. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted to believe reconciliation was possible. Perhaps this was Dad's awkward way of extending an olive branch. The dinner proved to be exactly what Grandma had predicted, an opportunity for Dad to bask in reflected glory. He introduced me to their guests, the Hendersons from 2 streets over, with elaborate emphasis on my company's success and recent media coverage. My daughter, the tech entrepreneur, he announced, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Always knew she'd make something of herself. Gets her business sense from me, though the computer stuff is all her. I maintained a pleasant smile throughout the evening, sharing appropriately modest details about Thompson Tech when directly asked. Mom hovered anxiously, refreshing drinks and offering appetizers with trembling hands. Tyler, who had been invited as part of the family display, caught my eye across the table and made a subtle eye-rolling gesture during Dad's third retelling of how he had always encouraged Mackenzie's interest in technology. After the Hendersons departed, I helped Mom clear the dishes while Dad and Tyler watched a sports highlight reel in the living room. That went well, Mom said softly. Your father was so proud to introduce you as his daughter. Was he? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. It seemed more like he was introducing my success as his achievement. Mom's hands stilled on the plate she was rinsing. Mackenzie, that's not fair. He's trying to take credit perhaps, I replied, then immediately regretted the harshness of my tone. I'm sorry. I wish he could see me, not just what I've accomplished. She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes, even as she struggled to articulate a defense of Dad's behavior. He shows love differently than most people. Through recognition of achievement. That's not love, Mom. That's approval. They're not the same thing. The conversation ended there, but the distinction I had named hung between us as I said my goodbyes and returned to my house across the street. That night, lying in bed and reflecting on the evening, I realized that success hadn't healed the fundamental wound in our relationship. If anything, it had simply shifted the dynamic. Dad now wanted to claim connection to me, not because he valued who I was, but because of what I had accomplished. The external markers of success, the house, the business, the media coverage, had earned his attention, but not in the way that mattered. The revelation was both freeing and sad. I was no longer the daughter desperately seeking validation, but the relationship I had once longed for seemed increasingly unlikely to materialize. Success had given me independence and security, but it couldn't purchase the unconditional love I had craved as a child. As I drifted toward sleep, I found comfort in the knowledge that I had built something meaningful, not just a business or a beautiful home, but a life filled with people who valued me for exactly who I was. Grandma Elaine sleeping peacefully down the hall. Amelia Wilson, whose belief in me had never wavered. My team, whose respect was based on genuine leadership rather than imposed authority. Perhaps that was the greatest success of all, creating a world where I belonged completely, no ultimatums required. Summer arrived with unusual heat, and the annual neighborhood block party. This tradition, which dated back to my childhood, transformed our quiet street into a festive gathering of food games and catching up with neighbors. In previous years, I had politely attended for brief periods before retreating to my air-conditioned sanctuary across from my parents' house. This year was different. As an established resident and successful businesswoman, I found myself drawn into conversations about local development, property values, and the changing character of the neighborhood. Several neighbors had children or grandchildren interested in technology careers, and I found myself distributing business cards and offering informational interview opportunities. Mom fluttered between conversation groups, visibly pleased by my integration into the community. Dad manned the grill as always, holding court with the neighborhood men while flipping burgers with practiced precision. Tyler home for the summer before his final semester played touch football with younger residents in the blocked-off street. The atmosphere was pleasant until mid-afternoon when I overheard Dad speaking to Mr. Davidson, a retired investment banker from the end of the block. "Mackenzie's always had that entrepreneurial spark," Dad was saying, his voice carrying in the still summer air. "I remember setting up her first computer when she was just a kid. Told her then, 'This is the future, learn how it works.' Guess she took my advice to heart." I froze my plastic cup of lemonade halfway to my lips. The computer he referred to was the one Grandma Elaine had given me, the one he had criticized as too much machine for a little girl. The encouragement he claimed to have offered had never materialized. Quite the opposite, in fact. For a moment I considered letting it pass as I had so many times before. What would confrontation accomplish except discomfort? Then I remembered Grandma's words. Someone has to be brave enough to speak the truth first. I approached the grill area, waiting until Mr. Davidson moved away to get another beer before speaking. "That's not how I remember it," I said quietly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Dad glanced up from the grill, spatula in hand. "What's that?" "The computer story you just told Mr. Davidson. That's not how it happened." He waved dismissively, turning back to the grill. "It was a long time ago. Details get fuzzy." "Not for me," I persisted. "Grandma Elaine bought me that computer. You said it was a waste of money because I'd lose interest in a month." Dad's shoulders tensed. He flipped a burger with unnecessary force, sending small grease flames shooting upward. "Mackenzie, this isn't the time or place for this conversation." "When is the time, Dad? You've been rewriting history since I moved back to the neighborhood. Taking credit for successes you never supported, claiming to have encouraged interests you dismissed." He set the spatula down deliberately and turned to face me, lowering his voice. "What exactly do you want from me?" "An apology." "Fine. I'm sorry I didn't buy you a computer when you were 12. Happy now?" The sarcasm in his tone ignited something in me, a willingness to push past the surface civility we'd maintained. "This isn't about a computer," I said, my voice still quiet but intense. "It's about you creating a false narrative where you supported me when you didn't, where you valued my interests when you clearly favored Tyler's, where you didn't give me an ultimatum that forced me out of my home." Dad glanced around, nervously aware that our conversation was starting to attract attention from nearby neighbors. "Let's not air family laundry in public, shall we? Your mother would be upset." As if summoned, Mom appeared at his side, her smile strained. "Everything okay here?" the Wilsons were asking. "About your scholarship program, Mackenzie." "We're fine," Dad answered before I could speak. "Just a small disagreement about childhood memories." "About the truth," I corrected. "There's a difference." Mom's eyes darted between us, her hands twisting the napkin she held. "Richard, the burgers are burning." Dad turned back to the grill with a curse, scraping the charred patties onto a waiting plate. The moment seemed to have passed, diffused by Mom's intervention and Dad's retreat into task focus. But something had shifted inside me. After years of accommodating the family narrative, of accepting the revisionist history that painted us as the perfect supportive unit, I could no longer maintain the pretense. I waited until the block party was winding down, guests dispersing to their respective homes with paper plates of leftover desserts. Dad was packing up the grill tools while Mom and several other women dismantled the buffet tables. I approached him again, determined to finish our conversation. "Being forced out of your house was the best thing that ever happened to me," I said without preamble. He looked up sharply. "What? You asked earlier what I wanted from you." "I don't want anything, Dad. I realized that when I bought the house across the street. I'm not here seeking your approval or recognition. I'm here because I choose to be." He straightened, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Then why are you bringing up ancient history? What's the point?" "Because you're still trying to control the narrative. You're taking credit for successes you actively discouraged. You're pretending to have been supportive when you were dismissive." And I wanted to stop. Dad's face flushed, the familiar anger rising. "So I wasn't a perfect father. Newsflash, Mackenzie, parenting doesn't come with a manual. I put a roof over your head, food on the table, and paid for your education. Most children would be grateful." "I am grateful for what you provided," I replied evenly. "But material support isn't the same as emotional support. And MIT was mostly covered by scholarships and student loans, which I'm still paying off despite my supposed wealth." This last point was a deliberate exaggeration. I had paid off my student loans immediately after the acquisition, but I wanted to challenge his persistent narrative about financing my education. "You turned out fine," he said dismissively. "Better than fine. So whatever you think I did wrong couldn't have been that bad. I succeeded despite your lack of support, not because of it," I stated clearly. And I need you to stop telling people otherwise. Mom approached cautiously, having overheard the escalating conversation. Please, both of you. Not like this. We're finally a family again. Are we? I asked, turning to her. Or are we just pretending nothing happened? Dad kicks me out over a bedroom, then suddenly wants to claim credit for my success when it suits him. That's not family. That's opportunism. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. Mackenzie, your father loves you. He's always loved you. Then he has a strange way of showing it, I replied, my voice softening as I addressed her. I'm not trying to hurt either of you. I just need honesty. I can't keep pretending. Dad's anger had morphed into cold indignation. If you're so damaged by our terrible parenting, why did you move across the street? Why not get as far away as possible? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times. Because part of me still hoped things could be different, I admitted. That seeing my success up close might change something, that we might finally have an honest relationship. Several neighbors lingered nearby, pretending not to listen while obviously absorbing every word. Mrs. Peterson was openly staring, her hands frozen, in the act of folding a tablecloth. Dad noticed the attention and his expression hardened. We'll discuss this privately, he said through clenched teeth. Fine, I agreed. But we will discuss it. I'm done pretending. I walked away, then crossing the street to my house with steady steps despite the emotional turbulence I felt. Inside, I found Grandma Elaine sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, having witnessed at least part of the confrontation. Well, she said, setting aside her book. That looked intense. It was, I confirmed, collapsing onto the sofa. I finally told Dad to stop taking credit for supporting me when he never did. She nodded approvingly. About time. How did Richard take it? About as well as you'd expect. I sighed, suddenly exhausted. Mom tried to smooth things over as usual. Catherine has spent her life smoothing things over, Grandma observed. It's easier than standing up to him. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching through the window as the last of the block party was dismantled. Dad disappeared into the house without looking in our direction. Mom continued helping with cleanup, her movements mechanical, her smile gone. I don't think Dad will speak to me for a while, I said finally. Probably not, Grandma agreed. Richard's never handled criticism well, but Tyler's heading this way. Sure enough, my brother was crossing the street, his expression determined. I met him at the door before he could knock. That was intense, he said, echoing my earlier description to Grandma. Dad's locked himself in his study, I figured. Tyler shuffled his feet awkwardly. Look, I know I was part of the problem. I took advantage of being the favorite. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. His straightforward admission caught me off guard. The entitled teenager had grown into a young man capable of self-reflection. I appreciate you saying that, I replied sincerely. For what it's worth, he continued, I think you're right. Dad's been bragging about you to everyone since you moved back, acting like he was your biggest supporter all along. It's weird. We talked for nearly an hour on the porch, the most honest conversation we'd ever had as siblings. Tyler shared his own complicated feelings about Dad's expectations and the pressure of being the golden child. I explained my perspective on our upbringing without blaming him for the preferential treatment he'd received. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand, he said as he prepared to leave. I was a self-centered kid. Most teenagers are, I offered with a smile. We're okay, thank you. The week following the block party passed in tense silence from across the street. Dad's car left early each morning and returned late each evening, clearly avoiding normal hours when we might encounter each other. Mom maintained minimal text, contact her messages carrying an undercurrent of anxiety. Then on Saturday morning, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Mom, 3 pages of her distinctive looping handwriting on floral stationery. The letter began with an apology. Not the reflexive "I'm sorry you feel that way" non-apology that had characterized previous attempts at reconciliation, but a genuine acknowledgement of her role in the family dynamic. I failed you as a mother, she wrote. I stood by while your father dismissed your interests and abilities. I allowed him to favor Tyler without intervention. I was silent when you needed an advocate. These are my failures, and I am truly sorry. She continued with specific memories, times she had witnessed unfair treatment, but remained quiet opportunities to support me that she had missed out of fear of conflicting with Dad. The level of detail surprised me. She had been more aware than I had realized. I don't expect forgiveness, the letter concluded. But I want you to know that I see the truth of what happened. Your success is yours alone, achieved despite our failures as parents, not because of our support. I am proud of you, not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you are. your strength, your determination, your integrity. These are qualities I wish I had demonstrated when you needed me most." She had signed it simply Mom with a postscript noting that Dad was not aware of the letter and she would prefer he not know about it for now. I sat on my porch reading and rereading the letter, emotions washing through me in waves. The acknowledgement I had sought for so long had finally arrived, partial from only one parent but genuine in its remorse. Across the street, I could see Dad's car in the driveway. He had emerged briefly to collect the mail, his posture rigid, his gaze deliberately averted from my house. His continued silence spoke volumes about his unwillingness to engage with the truth I had named. In that moment, watching him retreat back into the house that had once been my home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had spoken my truth. Mom had heard and acknowledged it. Tyler had offered his own apology and understanding. Dad's recognition might never come, and for the first time I realized I could accept that reality without it diminishing me. His inability to acknowledge the past was his limitation, not mine. Grandma Elaine joined me on the porch, settling into the adjacent chair with a soft groan. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting the letter in my hands. "Getting there," I replied, folding the pages carefully and returning them to the envelope. Getting there. 6 months after the block party confrontation, I stood on a stage at the Boston Convention Center, accepting the Technology Innovation Award for Thompson Tech's groundbreaking work with educational institutions. The audience of industry leaders applauded as I approached the microphone, the spotlight momentarily blinding me to the faces before me. "Thank you," I began the prepared speech, clear in my mind. "This recognition belongs to the entire Thompson Tech team whose dedication and vision make our work possible." As my eyes adjusted to the light, I could make out familiar faces in the front row. Grandma Elaine, elegant in a navy dress I'd helped her choose for the occasion. Amelia Wilson, my former teacher and now colleague, beaming with unmistakable pride. Mom sitting slightly apart from the others, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her smile tentative but genuine. And Tyler, who had driven 3 hours from his new job to attend the ceremony, giving me a subtle thumbs up. Dad's seat remained empty. The invitation I had sent received no response, his silence now extending to all family gatherings. I had stopped expecting his presence or approval, focusing instead on the relationships that brought mutual support and joy. After the ceremony, we gathered for dinner at my favorite restaurant overlooking the harbor. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses as we toasted the award and each other. "I always knew you'd change the world," Grandma Elaine declared, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "From the moment you took apart that old radio when you were 7 just to see how it worked." I remember that Mom said softly, "You labeled all the parts on index cards before removing them so you could put it back together correctly." The simple memory, shared without agenda or manipulation, felt like another small step toward healing. In the months since her letter, Mom had made consistent efforts to rebuild our relationship on more honest footing. Our weekly lunches had become a cherished routine, spaces where we could slowly unfold the past without judgment. Tyler had undergone his own transformation. Now working at a sports therapy clinic, he had discovered a passion for helping injured athletes recover, a career path Dad had initially dismissed as glorified massage before reluctantly accepting his son's choice. "Speaking of changing worlds," Tyler said, setting down his fork, "I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe physical therapy or sports medicine." "That's fantastic," I encouraged. "You've always been good with people." "Yeah, well, watching you build something meaningful made me realize I want more than just a job," he admitted. "I want purpose." The conversation turned to his educational options, with Amelia offering insights about various programs, and Grandma Elaine declaring her intention to contribute to his tuition just like I did for your sister. Throughout dinner, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led to this moment. From the bedroom ultimatum that had forced me out of my childhood home, to the award-winning business I had built, the chosen family I had gathered, the life I had created on my own terms. 2 weeks later, Tyler asked for my help reviewing his application essays for graduate school. We sat at my kitchen island, laptops, open mugs of coffee cooling beside us as we worked through his personal statement. "You're good at this," he remarked as I helped him restructure a particularly convoluted paragraph. "The explaining part. Making complicated things clear." "Practice," I shrugged. "I spend half my consulting time translating between technical and non-technical people." He nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Have you talked to Dad at all?" "Not since the block party," I admitted. "He hasn't reached out and I've stopped trying." Tyler sighed. "He's stubborn. Probably always will be." "Probably," I agreed. "But that's his choice." I've made mine. My choice had been to focus on the relationships that offered genuine connection while maintaining appropriate boundaries with those that didn't. Mom and I continued our careful rebuilding, acknowledging the past without letting it dominate the present. Tyler and I discovered the adult-sibling relationship we'd never had the chance to develop while living under our parents' unbalanced attention. Grandma Elaine thrived in my home, her sharp mind and practical wisdom a daily gift. Though her mobility had decreased, her spirit remained vibrant. She had become the unexpected heart of my household, greeting team members who stopped by for meetings, offering sage advice to scholarship recipients who visited for mentoring sessions. Thompson Tech continued to grow, expanding into new markets while maintaining our core values of innovation and inclusion. The scholarship program flourished, now supporting 15 young women annually in pursuing technology education. Several of our earliest recipients had joined the company as interns, bringing fresh perspectives and unbounded enthusiasm. One morning in early spring, I followed my daily ritual of enjoying coffee on the front porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in delicate pinks and golds. Across the street, my childhood home stood quiet, the blue shutters freshly painted, the lawn meticulously maintained as always. I no longer felt the complex mix of emotions that had once accompanied this view. The house across the street was simply a house now, a structure from my past rather than a symbol of rejection or a measure of success. I had made peace with what had happened there, understanding that the ultimatum that once devastated me had ultimately set me free. The bedroom I had been forced to surrender had pushed me onto a path of true independence. The parents who had failed to see my potential had inadvertently taught me to recognize and value it myself. The brother who had once benefited from unequal treatment had grown into a thoughtful man capable of genuine relationship. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the fundamental lesson of my journey. True success isn't measured by square footage or bank balances, awards, or acquisitions. It's measured by the ability to create spaces, physical and emotional, where you and those you care about can thrive authentically. I had created such spaces. The house I owned, the company I built, the relationships I nurtured, each one a room of my own making, filled with purpose and possibility. The front door opened behind me, and Grandma Elaine emerged with her own coffee cup, settling into the adjacent chair with a contented sigh. "Beautiful morning," she observed, gazing at the colorful sky. "Perfect," I agreed. We sat in companionable silence, watching the day unfold from a porch that belonged unquestionably to us. No conditions attached, no ultimatums looming. Sometimes being asked to leave is the beginning of finding where you truly belong. Looking back, that forced exit from my childhood home became the catalyst for everything good in my life today. While the pain was real, it pushed me to build something meaningful on my own terms. What's your story of overcoming rejection? Has someone's no ever led to your greatest yes? Drop a comment below and let me know how you turned an obstacle into an opportunity. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the door closing behind you is just making way for better ones to open ahead. Thank you for listening. And remember, the space that truly matters is the one you create for yourself.